Greetings and welcome back to the podcast. This episode, we are joined by Mr. Charlie Locke, owner of the Lake Louise Ski Resort and the Locke Stock and Barrel Company, which include, among other investments, ranching interests and oil and gas production. Mr. Locke was also one of Canada's leading climbers and ski mountaineers during the 1960s and 70s, which included pioneering climbs on the north face of Mount Temple, the 10 peaks at Moraine Lake, the Great Divide ski traverse from Jasper to Lake Louise, and over 40 first ascents of Alberta and British Columbia peaks. Mr. Locke also earned a commerce degree from the University of Calgary. Among other things, we discuss ski resorts, oil wells, and mountaineering, 50 years of entrepreneurship, and a few adventures along the way. This podcast episode is powered by ATB Capital Markets. ATB Capital Markets provides financial solutions and strategic advisory services to help businesses thrive. With a track record of successful deal execution, ATB is a full-service investment dealer with a deep understanding and commitment to the industries it serves. Visit atbcapitalmarkets.com for more information. This podcast episode is brought to you by Upgrade Labs. If you're serious about wellness and longevity, check out Upgrade Labs, now open in downtown Calgary. Inspired by biohacking pioneer Dave Asprey, Upgrade Labs offers cutting-edge treatments designed to optimize your health and performance in just minutes. Whether you're looking to boost recovery, improve energy, or enhance longevity, Upgrade's innovative therapies deliver results fast. As a bonus, mention this podcast when you book and receive a free recovery service. Head to upgradelabs.com/Calgary to schedule your free cell health analysis and start your wellness journey today. This podcast is brought to you by Energy United. Energy United is an organization with a mission to promote practical energy policy across Canada. Energy United is building a community of Canadians that are passionate about Canada's natural gas and oil industry and are willing to take action. Energy United is driving change on issues that matter, all the way from the carbon tax to the emissions cap. Join Energy United to make a difference at energyunited.ca. Okay, if you're ready, we can begin.
Yep, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Charlie Locke. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Trevor.
You've had an interesting career.
I'm not sure it's a career. I just tell people I've never had a job. Everything I've done through my whole life has been fun.
Cattleman, oilman, businessman, mountain man, entrepreneur, got family. But how would you describe yourself?
A redneck Albertan.
I guess that sums it up.
That pretty well sums it up. Cattle, oil, family, climbing, recreation, stuff. It sort of suits the name of my company, the Locke, Stock, and Barrel.
Right, which we will get into.
Okay.
You are the owner of the Lake Louise Ski Resort, but also the Locke, Stock, and Barrel Company. You're a rancher, so those are pretty self-explanatory, but what is Locke, Stock, and Barrel Company?
What does Lock, Stock, and Barrel mean? It means everything. Investments in stock, do oil, do ranching, securities, a lot of different income streams.
Coincidentally, your wife is named Louise also, which I read.
Yes.
Maybe not such a coincidence.
Well, not really a coincidence at all, because I married her before I invested in the ski area.
I thought for the purposes of the conversation, we could structure it chronologically, more or less.
You can do whatever you like, Trevor.
That works for you. So go back in time. I think you were born in Calgary originally?
Yes, born in Calgary, and not too far from here. I tell people I haven't gone very far in life. I just born over the hill here in Albo Park. That's where I grew up. I went to school less than a block away, the old Central High School, and junior high and elementary, in this area. So as I say, I haven't gone very far in life.
Did you go to U of C, or did you just go right into business?
Went into U of C, just got into U of C because my averages in high school, I just qualified for university entrance.
Did a degree there?
Commerce degree, because I wasn't smart enough to go into engineering.
So then you finish your degree and you get into mountaineering, or what did you do?
No, I started mountaineering at a relatively young age. or climbing at a relatively young age, probably 13, 14. And one of my neighbors' family was quite recreation and outdoor orientated. A fellow named Donnie Gardner persuaded me to go up the Elbow River. And there's some sandstone cliffs just below Glenmore Dam. So we used to climb on those cliffs. And then in terms of other adventures, to get up to the cliffs, we had to walk through a forest of spruce trees. So one day we took our hatchets along and an old piece of climbing rope, cut down a bunch of trees, used those trees to make a raft, tied them together with the rope, and floated home on the Elbow River. But when we got by our house, we just said, well, we're not going to get off. This is pretty fun. It's springtime and the river was quite high. So, in fact, actually, we tried to stop, but we couldn't. So we just kept going. So eventually, and fortunately, okay, we didn't know where we were going because we were fairly young kids. Not that young, but 12 and old enough to know what we're doing. So, as I said, we didn't know where the Elbow River ended up. But fortunately, I'm not sure whether it was me or Donnie, but quite a ways down the Elbow River, we jumped off and wrapped a piece of the rope around a pole, and the raft disintegrated. Okay, while we're on shore and safe. And then we looked, and we're only about 100 feet away from the Bull River. Had we gone into the Bull River, we'd have been history. And in those days, you didn't tell your parents nothing. I mean, some of our adventures were in the springtime, you know, how ice forms along a river. We would pry off chunks of ice and float down the river on those. Now, these days, I don't think many parents would let their kids do that, but...
Can get away with that.
Yeah.
Maybe for the listener, during the 60s and 70s, you were a mountain guide and...
yeah, as I said, I started climbing fairly early, probably 14 or 15, but one spring, I guess when I was 21, I must have just been through my third year university. There was a guides course, and in those days, my friend Donnie Gardner, who I mentioned before, was a good friend of Hans Moser, who started CMH, and Donnie was going to work up north, but I said, well, there was a guides course, mountain guides course, so I took that course. In those days, that was in 67, you could get your guides license, one by reputation, and two by doing the test. But prior to 67, we'd done quite a bit of climbing, starting in about 64, doing things like the traverse of Mount Rundle from Glenmore to Banff, lots of climbs on Yamnuska, many other climbs and cross-country ski trips. One of the most memorable trips was in 64. If I had to list my 10 top accomplishments, this would be one, as we started off from Moraine Lake and climbed up, starting on the left. When you look up to the left on Mount Babel rather, climbed all 10 peaks, plus another 10 for a total of 23 peaks in 7 days. And I'm thinking, when I look back at 16-year-old kids, there's not many of those these days that would do that. But anyway, that was sort of the first of our several accomplishments. And, you know, as I said, another time in the winter, traversing from Glenmore to Banff on the bridge on Mount Rundle. But many other adventures.
Again, for the listener, in addition to the Moraine Lake adventure, you also became the youngest certified mountain guide in the British Commonwealth in 67?
Yeah.
Pioneered the Great and Wide Ski Traverse from Jasper to Lake Louise?
Yep. We had nothing to do after university 1 year, so we said, well, I know that I mentioned Hans Moser before. He tried it, wasn't able to do it, and with us, the answer is always yes, but we can do this. So used a different approach than Hans Moser. Because his was a big event in CBC and all this stuff, and we're just 4 kids, and we said, well, shit, we'll just do this. So we did 3 food caches between Jasper and Lake Louise, and as soon as the university was out, we headed south. Because if you look at a map, we went from north to south, like a globe, so along all the various ice fields.
Also, more than 40 first ascents and new routes?
Well, that's what we did, you know. I mean, there was something about me that attracted girls to other men. So we used to go climbing every weekend. our criteria was, has anybody done this before? Yes. Well, let's look at something else. In those days, most of the climbing was done the easy way up the mountains. We used the easy way to get down and looked for big faces nobody had climbed before, just because we like to do something new. That was our way of creating.
So you'd head out to the mountains every weekend, more or less.
Pretty well. We crank up my 1934 Ford, and away we went. It had one of these cranks in the front of it. Maybe you remember seeing that in some of your grandpa's day, but and away we went.
Lake Louise Ski Hill wasn't there during this
days? The ski area was there was two ski areas in those days. There was one called Whitehorn, which is the front face, and one called Temple, two separate ski areas. So one of our early adventures was we were skiing at Whitehorn. In those days, there was an old gondola that went from the highway to halfway up the mountain. So we went up the gondola, and you could get 7 runs in a day. Again, we're adventurers. So we now just learning, to mountaineer and stuff. So we put skins on our skis from Whitehorn Lodge and skied up and over the Eagle Shoulder and down through the woods, because that was before the Ptarmigan lift was built, and through the trees. And we're just guided by the putt of the generator from Temple, and ended up at Temple, and then went up the lift on Larch without lift tickets, but we talked our way onto the lift and then skied down what we called then was the 5-mile run from the top of Larch down to the gondola base, which is on the highway.
Of all those adventures and hikes and first ascents and trips, was there one that sticks out as your favorite or most memorable?
Well, obviously, the traverse of those 10 peaks was one of the first really worthwhile adventures, and here we are, I think, 60 years later, and people have tried it, but nobody has ever done that again. I'd say the traverse from Jasper down to Lake Louise over the ice fields is significant. And then the north face of Mount Temple is what a lot of people know my name for. And then we did a lot of winter climbing.
I guess in those days you could have just showed up to Moraine Lake too. The road was totally open and there wasn't the crazy.
Well, these days, I mean, as you know, Canada's broke, but we used to camp even in the summertime, just right up at the lake.
You go right up to Moraine Lake.
Oh yeah, in fact, anybody could really camp. There was a campground just to your left as you approach the lake. You probably, if you've been up there, if you sort of walk down the path toward Constellation Lake, that was camping.
Different time
now. It's just overregulated.
Yeah. Then somewhere along the way, you ended up at peters&co, if I'm correct.
Yep.
How'd that?
Well, my first job. Okay, let me just think about this. I went to university. Then I graduated. Worked for the Bank of Commerce for a couple months, but I didn't like the bank too much. They wanted me to work Friday nights, but on Friday nights I wanted to go up the mountains and climbing. So I had an interest in buying and selling securities. Since I was 12, I bought and sold stocks, and that's how I put my way through university. So then I went to work for a company called Royal Securities. And Royal Securities, stodgy old firm, blue chip as you can get, created by a guy called Sir Isaac Killam, who was in the 1930s was the richest man in Canada, because he bought up all the bankrupt utility companies in the Maritimes, and then they came out of the Depression and he made a gazillion. Anyway, I worked for Royal Securities for, I'm not sure, maybe 1 year or 2 years, and then Rob Peters. I joined Rob Peters, and he had a fellow called Ray Hugo had started a company, Peters Hugo. So I joined those two, and then Hugo left, and a fellow called Hugh Ulster joined. So then it was just Peters and Company with Hugh Ulster and I being the company. So, and we, small little local brokerage, and did deals and had fun. And actually that's in 1974 is when a fellow called Sir Rodney Touche walked through our door looking for some money to build some of the first ski lifts in Lake Louise. At that time, there was the gondola lift at Lake Louise, the large lift at Temple, and I think the summit platter at Lake Louise as well. Because when I said the gondola lift, it went from the highway up to the old Olympic chair top. When she skied down that trail to the base of the summit lift. So that's when I first invested in Lake Louise and raised the money to put in things like the Eagle Lift and ptarmigan and all that stuff.
How'd you meet Rob Peters?
He was a big guy when I was a kid. Sort of lived in the same neighborhood. But if you remember back when you're 6 or 8 or 10 years old, guys who were 13 and 14 were big guys. And I sort of knew members of his family, Huey Townsend and Stephanie Townsend and other people in that sort of family group. I can't think of their names now, but that sort of, I wouldn't say really met him. He was in the neighborhood.
So how long were you at peters&co for then?
About 10 years. It started in 71. I joined in 72. I was there from 72 to 1982. And again, as I mentioned, I bought Lake Louise in 1981. I didn't have any money, but I phoned the bank and said, lend me a gazillion million. And they said, fine, come in a couple of weeks and sign a note. So that's what I did. And we made an offer for the various shareholders. Again, as you mentioned before, sort of a mountain type of person. So Charlie's been around a while and good family, good name, good reputation. We'll sell our shares to Charlie. So that's how I got involved in the ski business.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Conate Water Solutions. Do you need cost-effective water sourcing options to supply your next drilling or completions program? Conate Water Solutions is a specialized hydrogeology company focused on water well drilling, testing, and water management services in Western Canada and Texas. Contact info at conatewater.com or check out conatewater.com for more details. At the time, you had the option, or I guess you invested in oil and gas at the same time, but you kind of had skiing, but you had oil, you had securities. What led you to
lock, stock, and barrel? So in the investment business, I mean, I had friends I went to university with, of course, and one guy sold me an oil and gas investment in northeastern BC. We bought a bunch of land. You're too young to remember drilling funds, but we farmed out parcel land to a German drilling fund who drilled a successful well. My initial $10,000, which I didn't have, he said, write me a check for $10,000, so I did anyway. And those days the bank didn't care much. I mean, they're in the business to lend money, and made quite a good return on that, 70 or 80 times. So that was my seed money to get involved in Lake Louise.
So you did Lake Louise in the same time as you were doing?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Because what the hell do I know about running a ski resort? I'm a farmer and a gambler. and in those days, I think the first year we bought it, we did reasonably well, and we had to pay $1 million income tax. I said, holy cripes. So I said, I better pay attention to this big investment. Because at that time, the investment was maybe $15 million, give or take. And that was, even today, that's a reasonable investment. But for a kid that's, how old was I in 1981? That would be about 25. So I said I better pay attention to the ski area. So that's what I did. And I stayed with the brokerage company for about a year after I bought out all the other shareholders. Because, as I said, what do I know about running a ski area? I can buy and sell shares, stocks, but don't know much about running ski areas. So anyway, we paid a bunch of tax, and then I started running the ski area.
Did you view it as a lucrative business opportunity, or was it kind of a passion
No,
project?
I've never had a job in my life. So, well, it'd be fun doing that. I don't know nothing about it, but I can learn, because in the investment business, you do numbers. But in the ski business, you got to be everything. You got to be a mechanic, a cook, marketer, on and on it goes. You got to have a whole suite of skills. Yeah.
Lots of people have fallen in love with Lake Louise in the area. Like I said, I got married there in the spring.
Yeah.
But how and why and when did you fall in love with Lake Louise in the area?
I'm not sure I've fallen in love with it, but as I mentioned, this climbing adventure we went on when I was much younger. I mean, my first memory of Lake Louise, well, I got a few really early memories, was skiing there and at Temple, rather, in the 1950s. 7 or 8, went up with one of my friends and first time skiing. I had to ski out from the top of Larch down to the highway. That wasn't very much fun for a 7.5-year-old kid. So that was one of the last times I cried, And if you cross-country skied much, you know what happens if you have the wrong wax, your skis ball up. Well, there I was, an 8-year-old kid walking my way, clumping down towards the highway when everybody else was whizzing by me. But I wouldn't say I was in love. That was my first acquaintance with Lake Louise. And then you go skiing there a few times in high school. And then, as I said, in 1981, it's 1974 rather, when I first bought shares.
So I guess the question is, why did you buy shares at Lake Louise? It was
to make money.
Yeah.
I mean, in those days, I was working with Rob Peters, and there's 2 or 3 of us in the office there. And they came in looking for some money, and I thought, okay, there's some advantages to Lake Louise and that ski business. Sold cash, get thousands of customers, and nobody can build a better mousetrap.
How did you balance running a business with large fixed assets and a lot of fixed costs with making a profit without giving away your secrets?
I have no secrets. I mean, as I said, I do a little of everything. I'm a farmer. I'm good with machinery, reasonably good. I can raise money. I can market. I've got some skills because I was I'd been a shareholder in 1981. We invested in 74, so I knew I was making some money. I think in 1980, and there's a bunch of us that were shareholders, like 70 or 80 shareholders. Some of them were not very pleasant people. And they got into some lawsuits, not with me, but I mentioned Rodney earlier, and a couple other guys were suing one another. They didn't like the way the ski area was being run. One of my partners at Peters & Company was going to buy it. He chickened out because of the lawsuits. I said, well, I'll buy it. So then, as I said, I phoned up the bank and said, "Then make $1 million," and they said, "Sure, come on in and sign some notes in a few weeks." So we made the bid, went back and forth between ourselves and Scurfield. And at the end of the day, they decided to sell to me because of my mountain background.
Yeah, at times one of the best ways to make money in the ski area is through the real estate, but at Lake Louise, you can't sell the real estate. How did you think about that?
That's the perception of that, but it took Interwest a long time at Whistler to break even on real estate. Because I mentioned I deal in securities. I'd invested in Interwest when they went public. You bought shares at 11, and 5 or 6 years later, I sold them at 9. They didn't do very well to begin with. And maybe 8, maybe 10 years later, they finally got their real estate underway. Challenge being, on real estate, is the cost of the infrastructure, sewage, water, telephone, blah, blah, blah. So that's the perception that there's a lot of money in real estate, but I guess there can be if you invest in the right stuff at the right time and don't get bogged down with the basic infrastructure costs.
So for you viewed it as just cash flow from the visitors to the ski hill?
I mean, I didn't really look at it as cash flow. I thought, well, that'd be interesting investment. It makes money, so we don't take out any cash. I mean, other than to pay back our initial investment. So we just thought it'd be fun, it's something different. Just want to invest in the ski area, and then I bought my partners out. And again, as other investments, I farm and a bit of oil and gas, securities, and blah blah.
Things were going well from 81 until roughly 2003, but then you hit a rough patch and
in 81 or 82, interest rates got to 22%. And then in the late 90s, I bought a bunch of ski areas. I started RCR, got sort of an oligopoly on the local skiers. We had about 3 bad years in a row, so I brought in a partner. And he had, at that time, $800 million, and I didn't. So we went into CCAA, which is sort of a it's not bankruptcy, it's just a rearrangement of your finances. And he came in as a 50% partner. And then he had 800 million and I didn't. So he owns the gold rules. So then I sold out to my 50% to him, but kept a 5-year option to buy back. So after 5 years, walked up with my $10 million to buy back his 50% interest, which I did.
So I guess the question is, why did all that happen? Just poor weather and weren't able to?
Well, the only thing I know about my predictions is they're going to be wrong.
Yeah.
So we had 3 low snow years in a row.
I see.
And that really squeezed me.
Revenues weren't there.
Yeah. Just barely covering the interest costs.
Some say the best ski hill is the one you're currently at. But from your perspective, although you're a bit biased, what makes a good ski hill to you?
Long cruising runs. So actually, Fernie had some good runs. Kimberley was actually the ski area I enjoyed skiing at the most, just because it's got a whole long series of
groomers.
So anyway, I liked Kimberley the most.
Aside from Lake Louise.
To me, the runs of Kimberley are still better. There's more of them, appear to be more of them than at Lake Louise in terms of long cruising runs. Well, you grew up skiing there, so you get off the lift and there's 20 runs. You can take off to the right there, off to the west.
Yeah. Viad, I think is their name.
Viad.
Smart company.
That's the old Brewster company. And then they renamed her when Greyhound bought it, or whoever bought it, renamed to Viad.
Yes.
Yep.
From the States.
Yes. Yeah, Greyhound was an American company who bought into Canada, I think. Yeah.
The issue is they own a lot of stuff in between Jasper and Banff these days. So I guess from your perspective, why is that a problem?
Not a problem. I don't have any concerns at all with the competition. I never criticize someone for being a good business person. So they're smart people. I'm not concerned in Lake Louise because no one can build a better mousetrap. So, if I was Mount Norquay, I wouldn't even be concerned there either because every area has its own strengths.
You're in the business of ski hills, but do you ever worry that the Bow Valley is getting too busy?
No, you go to other tourist areas like Italy or whatever. It's like Banff Avenue in the middle of July, even if you go off season. So no, it's, I haven't noticed. There are busy areas, but for a person, individual, you want to get away from the crowds, very easy. Just go 100 feet away onto a trail and you're in the wilderness. Yeah, but Banff Avenue, it's a tourist town.
The World Cup at Lake Louise.
Yeah.
It's no longer. So I guess from your perspective, maybe why? And is that a good or bad thing?
Well, sort of neutral. It had its strengths being preseason. So Lake Louise got a lot of marketing from it. From when we open, usually on the Friday before Remembrance Day, to the end of November, normally the whole ski area is not open. And then we get lots of publicity from Lake Louise. Canada's renewable resources winter, so we always were able to have races, which were then televised, not only throughout Europe, but also in Eastern Canada. And none of the races at Lake Louise, I shouldn't say none, but out of 150 World Cup races we held, maybe only 2 were cancelled. And not for lack of snow, but for weather. Whereas they tried to hold these World Cups in Whistler. They tried 3 times, I think, and failed each time. And that's why the World Cup was transferred to Lake Louise. Now, it was run by Alpine Canada, not by the ski area. Alpine Canada was the organizing party who financed and prepared the courses and whatever. In the initial years, it was profitable for them. But it turned, in the later years, on holding the World Cups, it ended up costing them some money. And when they weren't making money, they stopped holding the races.
From your perspective, is loss of the World Cup a problem?
Yeah. Lake Louise's name has always been on the map. You go over to Europe, there's 2 spots in Canada, Niagara Falls and Lake Louise, or Niagara Falls and Banff Lake Louise, Whistler to a lesser extent. Just when you think of other countries, you think of India, Taj Mahal. You think of other countries, every country has something that's famous.
Do you think the World Cup will ever come back to Lake Louise?
Don't know. I mean, it costs a lot of money. I mean, if they figure they can make some money, we supply the ski area and we sell them stuff. So whether they come back or not, I don't know. I don't think under the current management of Alpine Canada, Alpine Canada has awarded the rights to hold World Cups. And at least last year, I think, was one of the first years away from Lake Louise. And they figure they can get way more spectators in Quebec than they can out here. Like here, there'd be nobody watching the race. I mean, for the first few races, lots. Like in 1984, I think we ran one of our first races by default because, as you know, with World Cups, they cancel speed races all the time in Europe. So Lake Louise had a makeup race, and we had 4,000 or 5,000 people for that first race. And then the crowd sort of dwindled off. So, and then there's perception. People won't come to Lake Louise if they're holding a World Cup because it's crowded, or the perception is it's crowded. For example, on occasion, World Cups were held at other ski areas like Panorama and Sunshine. The day the race was at Panorama was our busiest day of the season. Same thing with the day the race was at Sunshine. It was our busiest day of that season. So the customer said, I'm not going there because there's a race. It'd be too crowded. So they came to Lake Louise and made us crowded, which I thought that's great.
I'm just curious, politically in Alberta, favorite premier? You've seen a lot through the years, or maybe none.
I think being in politics would be one of the worst jobs a person could ever have.
Did you ever meet King Ralph?
King Ralph, I never referred to as King Ralph. But
Why?
Yeah, you were Peter, who, had a house in Banff and skied at the ski area quite a bit before he was premier. And so, I met him a little bit, but he was an old guy and I was a young guy. So ran across him from time to time, when he was more of a lawyer than prior to him getting into politics. And then I said, I stay away from politics. Worst job a person could ever have.
Favorite run in Lake Louise?
Favorite run? I'd say Meadowlark.
Really?
When it's groomed and flat. Long cruising run.
So I guess that would mean you're a fan of the carved turn as opposed to powder skier?
Yeah, no, I love powder skiing when there's powder. But by noon, most of the easy spots are skied out. So you go skiing for 3 hours. It's great. Big tracks everywhere. I go up with the ski patrollers before the area opened. Ski a few runs, which is good. Not many people can do that. I can do that. Being an alpine guide, I have to test some of the slopes for avalanche.
For sure.
If I come out at the bottom, then it's open.
Yeah. Advice to a 30-year-old Charlie Locke?
I have to think of where I was at 30.
Where were you at 30? Yeah.
Well, I was kind of depressed. I remember that because I said, oh, shit, I'm not a young guy anymore. I'm 30. What have I done with my life? Because when I was younger, I was fairly well known for climbing, and hockey and different stuff. And here it was, I spent 10 years with Peters and Company, which was fine. But I also owned 2 or 3 farms. So after I thought, well, I'm 30. I'm not doing too badly because, I have all these cattle and a bunch of land, good job, good wife. So I would say just carry on and make investments, which I did. So the criteria for making an investment, first question is, can I lose? And if I figure I can lose, I don't make the investment because being in the investment business, you're dealing with all your customers. You want to keep your customers and you don't want to have them lose money. So I did very well in the investment business because some of my customers got rich, but I didn't. So that's the advice is just never, which I tell my kids, never do anything you could ever be ashamed of. And that's sort of one of the lessons I've lived my life on.
What is the best deal you ever saw? Best investment that you've been a part of? Does anyone stick out?
Well, the one I told you about earlier, the one where the guy asked me for a $10,000 check and it turned into $700,000.
That was the drilling fund back.
Yeah, back in
okay.
whenever that was, a long time ago.
Huh.
Because that gave me my seed that I planted to create additional capital.
You think there's still as much opportunity in the traditional energy business as there was when you were younger?
I'm sure there is. I mean, there's lots of opportunity in tech. There's lots of areas that I know nothing about where people make a pile of money. In terms of oil and gas, for example, on my farm, there were some old abandoned oil wells that a big company owned. And I took, there was 5 of them. I took those wells over for basically $1, assumed the reclamation liability, pumped those for a bunch of years, and then actually 20 years, and then horizontal drilling has come in and done quite well on those now. Industry involves, and there's technology and stuff. And again, all I know about my predictions is they're going to be wrong. So I just carry on and hopefully make $1 more than we spent and not have to worry about the bank, which we don't. It took me 30 years to pay the bank off. So I'm not going there anymore. 30-year-old Charlie Locke, just do deals and make sure you don't lose any money or your customers' money.
What's been the favorite time of your career so far?
When we had RCR, like 5 or 6 resorts, that was fun. Just the camaraderie and that we had in those days. I don't have as much now, only because there's really just me and if you're a manager, but in those days we just seemed to be more camaraderie.
Do you ever think about expanding Lake Louise to other ski hills?
1, I don't think my wife would let me, but 2, I don't have any ambition to do that. Now, I mean, I'm good enough. I met we got one of the best ski areas anywhere in the world. And I got, all my other investments. We got lots of land. One of my other occupations is a farmer and, just looking at the crops today. Got hailed out on all my canola in August, but it all grew back from the roots and we're going to have a good canola crop. So I got great satisfaction from farming. Cattle prices are up, got lots of calves. Oil is up. What else is there in life? I just sort of coast along and one day leads to another.
You haven't had to work for a while. What motivates you now?
I tell people I've never had a job in my life. I mean, all the jobs I have, people pay to do. Like when I was a mountain guide, I loved going climbing. And in those days, people paid me $300 a day just to take them up a mountain. I thought, Jesus Christ, I used to do this for free. So that was fun. And then in the investment business, buying and selling, that's not a job. That's, right away, whether you're right or wrong, whether you win or lose. In the ski business, I look out my window and see the thousands of people that pay for an experience they get just a few times a winter. I can do anytime. So I just, as I said earlier, I don't have a job. I just do stuff.
Well, that's a lot of questions.
Okay, Trevor, thank you.
I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but...
No, I hopefully haven't said too much that will get me in trouble with my family, but...
if you don't want to add anything else, we can end the formal conversation there. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Hello, listeners out there. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Hopefully the episode provided some insights. If you enjoyed the show, check out trose.ca where more episodes are yet to come. You can also subscribe to the podcast where your token of support is much appreciated. Until next time, happy coffee drinking.